you've worked at all these places, and in my research on you, I was identifying some points that you had made about staging and how you kind of like think about work. And so I'm curious, how did you initially approach staging, and then how have those opinions kind of like evolved over time for you?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. So back in the day, I used to stage as many chances as I could get, right? I mean, I would leverage my time for like just the experience. So I staged at everywhere you could imagine in New York, DC, Chicago, Vegas. But what I realize is over time, I feel like it is beneficial to the cook, but I also feel like it's a waste of time. And let me explain. If you go as a stagiaire, you're not going to get the experience that you need to be successful. So let me put things in perspective. I'm a different breed. Okay. When I went to culinary school, I already had the basic cook fundamentals. I just went for the piece of paper, right? So when I went to stage, I went into the place like I was on fire. Okay. And so I was doing different jobs than, let's say, somebody who just came fresh out of CIA for an internship. You're going to get the tasks that are not going to help out your future. Picking lettuce, picking herbs, sweeping the floor, doing all of these things. I think that does a due diligence, like it doesn't do you any justice to get that experience. I would recommend getting hired as a paid employee because you will be held accountable. And trust me, the reason why I say that is because when I grew up as a cook, you needed to stay in a place for a year or more or it's no good. Now that has changed. If you get 6 months out of a place and you're like, I don't fucking like this, I'm going to go down to the restaurant down the street, it's acceptable. And so a lot of people ask me, hey, what do you think about staging? I think it's great, but I would actually recommend pick a restaurant that you want to work at. Like, there's enough information with employees giving reviews on the internet, social media, where you can make a logical decision on whether you want to work there or not, right? I'm sure you can agree. When I was growing up as a cook in 2010, I couldn't see if Cafe Boulud was like, I just knew that it was Daniel's restaurant. I didn't know the chef was a lunatic, but you know what? I went there and I worked and like I staged, I did a tryout. And that's different than a stage, but I did a tryout. I got hired, but nowadays I think it's best if you get hired as a cook, a commis, or a prep cook at an entry level. And if it doesn't work out within 90 days, then you roll out. But that way you're held accountable and you actually have job duties. You will learn so much more very quickly.
I think that's a great, like, so many people like binaries, right? Like us as humans like binary decisions, call them rules, because it allows us to kind of like take a look at options or take a look at a specific idea and have a decision that is like societally acceptable, industry acceptable. Like it helps us offload that decision making process to something else. And I think it's important to acknowledge that like there are so many underlying variables with staging where there's like, at what state is the industry in? Are we, 2013 when the industry was like, it was impossible to get a job anywhere because everything was so super competitive? Or are we just coming out of COVID and like everybody has opportunities available? Is it a position where you're going to be doing what you were sharing, where you're picking lettuce and picking herbs and sweeping the floor, or is it a situation where you previously had no experience, but you as a stagiaire at this place gets paired up with the garde manger chef de partie, and you're going to get to plate all service and help them with their prep list? Two very different stage experiences. Simultaneously, are you going there for 1 or 2 days just to kind of check it out and get your feet wet and potentially give yourself some exposure to an environment like a 2 Michelin-star or a 3 Michelin-star restaurant? Or is this something where you're going to go for a month unpaid and you're just continue to do the grunt, boring work all the time, and you've wasted, quote unquote, like you've gotten the experience of that experience by day 3, and you're going to spend 27 more days at that place? I think that there's so many underlying things that people don't like to talk about, and the label of staging is good, staging is bad. I mean, you're looking at two guys who have had immense benefits to taking staging experience and really kind of like using it as a tool to kind of like step up to the next level, or kind of like, because I don't know if you can empathize with this, but I used a lot of my staging experience to see different environments so that when the right opportunity came, I was like, yeah, that's the one. Like, I want to work at that place, because I just had no context, man. Like, when I was in culinary school and I was staging, I didn't know what made a good kitchen. I didn't know what, like, how service was run. I didn't know any of that stuff. You know, I was like, culinary school was my exposure, and so I used it as kind of like an experimentation realm to kind of see how different kitchens operate. So I don't know if you have a reaction to all of that.
No, you know what? That's a great point. And I think, that's why I try to say, I tell a lot of people it's user specific. Like if somebody says, hey, chef, should I go to culinary school? It's like, well, hold up now. Like, but it really depends. Like, I don't know. Are you in the military? Are your parents paying for it? Are you paying for it? What type of chef do you want to be? Like, there's so many questions that come along with that. But I do agree with you. Like, if you have the means, like if I could go back, I would have saved my money for culinary school. I would have took out a personal loan and I would have went across Europe and backpacked into Michelin rated restaurants. But I think at that time, like, I mean, I don't know, at 19, I was, so fucking dumb. Like I couldn't, all I knew is I just wanted to cook. I knew that, but that's all I had to hold on to. But I do agree, like if you have the opportunities to go stage at a really high-end restaurant for 3 months, my absolute advice is don't suck. You need to outwork everybody else. Make yourself visible, because guess what, man? As chefs, when we're running restaurants, we have blinders on. I can't tell you how many times where I would be working at Alinea and, we had the townhouse right next door where, it was like the herb picking house. We kept all the chef's garden stuff. And, I'll be honest, most stages didn't make it over to the restaurant, bro. They just stayed over there and worked into oblivion. You know what I'm saying?
And I had the same experience when I was, so I staged at Noma for a week, and I had the same experience of seeing people who didn't take their head up from the cutting board. Like they were just completely fine, just kind of like shingling out rose petals or cleaning celery with a little brush. And I think that that's such a missed opportunity. Now, not to say that you need to go into the kitchen that you're staging at and all of a sudden start like, networking up a storm. But I think that there's a difference between being a wallflower in a restaurant and actually realizing that there are networking opportunities everywhere you look when you're staging at a place, from the sense of like, you can have a conversation with the butcher and then all of a sudden that, because like, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, all of a sudden 3 months later, that person has opened up a new cool wine bar down the street that like you'd be really interested in working at. And we both were at XYZ. We were both at Bennu at the same time. Holy shit. Like let's collaborate on something like that. So there's benefits outside of just the work experience you're going to get to staging.
Yeah. You know what? Here's a good point. And I keep bringing up Alinea, but it's just part of my career because it's a good example. I started at Alinea when they did the collaboration with 11 Madison Park. And I mean, this kitchen was a madhouse, right? But the thing is my first day, I made sure I was on fire. And guess what? I remember the chef saying, hey, we want this guy over here. And so I came to the main kitchen and, it was funny because my first task was making sure the root ends of these baby leeks were absolutely spotless for this dish. And I remember the CDC saying, there needs to be zero dirt in here. Like, he's like, do you understand what zero is? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Yes, chef. And I stood over the sink for, 10 hours straight, cleaning every single one of these leeks by hand. I went through them like 2, 3, 4 more times. And I remember like taking a little bit, going to the chef, and I'm like, chef, is this acceptable? And he said, yes, absolutely. Make sure every single one is like that. And I said, okay. And then once I did that task really good, my next task was making sure the carrot tartare grinder was clean. Yep. And it was funny because whoever was doing it before was fucking it up. They were sending out dirty ones or whatever. And I remember putting on like a food runner jacket, and he's like, I need you to make sure these are clean. That was when James Kent was the CDC. And it was so funny because I made sure that shit was spotless, my guy. Like, it doesn't matter the task. What people don't understand is, why do I have to do this? Or like the attitude, like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, this situation of you cleaning the carrot grinder is not going to matter in 5 years. You just need to do the best of your ability. And of course, like, this will get you farther, but I know what you're saying. A lot of people, they can hide behind the cutting board, or they just want to, say, hey, I worked at Noma, but zero context. Like, they just want to put Noma on the resume. Like, I totally get it, but it's like, I want to know what you did there.
Totally. It's why I had to. This will serve as an answer to a question I've gotten a couple times in the past couple weeks. People have asked how to identify stages that they've done on their resume. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. What I did was I created, in the same way that you have like an extracurriculars when you're kind of like applying for whatever on your resume, I would have a stagiaires section of my resume, and I would just put the restaurant and the date that I staged there, because my advice and the point of this is don't lump it in with your work experience, because as you and I are both discussing right now, they're not the same. You having the accountability of being a paid employee, running a station, XYZ responsibilities that you might have as a W-2 person is different than what you have as a stage. And so, but don't not say that, because I think, and you and I are both testaments of this, the people who are staging are usually the people who are like what you're saying. They can show up fired up, excited, on their time off. This is all they're thinking about. They constantly want to improve themselves, see new things, meet new people. And so have a separate section of your resume that says stages, stagiaire, and then you just put the name of the restaurant and the date that you staged there, or maybe the date window. And that really helped me. I'd be curious if you have thoughts.
Yeah. So I do the same exact thing that you did. Obviously the time, my last stage was, in 2010. So, 2010. So what I did is it's at the bottom of my resume, and I just put, staged here, the name of the restaurant, Michelin stars, and then I put the year now. I don't put the specific date, but I just put the year. Yep. And
I would
believe it or
month,
not,
month and year, I think, is what I would do.
Yeah. And like the thing is what I've been doing now, Justin, is so basically I have a 90-second video of my full portfolio.
Tight.
And let me tell you something, this has shaken some heads, right? So I've used my video creator experience to I pulled these iPhone videos from way back in the day. Because you got to remember, when we grew up in the kitchen, you wouldn't dare pull your phone out, bro. I got caught once pulling my phone out, and that was it for me, man. I almost got thrown in the fryer. And, and it wasn't even like anything, I wasn't even snapping a picture or anything. I was trying to turn it off because the notifications were on. And I remember the chef absolutely losing it, deep end losing it. He just needed somebody to yell at. I get it. But it wasn't until 2015, 2016 where it became socially acceptable in a kitchen to, pull out your phone. So, but great points though. But I put my stages at the bottom of my resume, all the way at the bottom.
That's tight.